This is The Speaking Show. I'm David Newman, and you're tuned in to the #1 podcast for speakers, consultants, and experts who want to speak more profitably. Karen Friedman, communications expert, media mogul. Welcome to The Speaking Show.
Hey, David. Thanks for having me.
You are like the perfect person to talk to because you do media, you do communication, you do leadership, you do crisis communication. We need all of these things. Before we jump into all of that, give us a quick sketch of your professional journey that brought you to doing the work that you're doing today.
So I'll take you way back, but I won't keep you back there too long. I began my career as a television news reporter, working in stations around the country, and then ending up at ABC Action News in Philadelphia for 12 years. And during that time, I was a storyteller and a writer, and I never really knew how that would translate to today. 23 years ago, and I'm not that old, 23 years ago, I started my own business, Karen Friedman Enterprises. We started doing media and crisis training. Then the business morphed into speaker training, preparing for presentations, message development. Message is at the core of anything and everything you do. And in a nutshell, how to make people become more compelling communicators. I never knew that everything I learned back in my TV days would really contribute to so much of what we do today. And that's my very, very short journey of how I got to where I am.
So now we're in this crazy upside down world that no one has ever been in. Executives, leaders, salespeople, everyone's hair is on fire. They're going crazy. And we're communicating now more than ever because everyone's remote. Everyone's isolated. Everyone's in front of a screen like we are right now on Zoom. What are some of the big mistakes that you're seeing now with either leadership communication, crisis communication? Where are some of these new stumbling blocks in the new world as you see it?
So let's talk about new stumbling blocks. Great way to put it. Communicating across a screen is not the same as communicating in person. So number one, people don't know where to look. So let's say, for example, you and I are looking at each other. That's a little easier because I can kind of look around my little screen and you can see me. But when we have all those little tiles, people have dubbed it the Brady Bunch approach. What happens is somebody is speaking, and let's say, David, you're at the upper left-hand corner of my screen. So it's natural for me to look at you, but then it looks like I'm looking somewhere else, that I'm not making eye contact. Same thing if I look up, same thing if I look down. So two things have to happen that are very different than in person. One is you have to focus yourself to look at the camera. It's kind of like back years ago in my TV days, if a light came crashing down or somebody mooned me on camera, which actually happened, I would have to do everything in my power not to look, not to react, to just focus on the camera. That's one. The second part of that is you see a lot of people that are kind of slumping back and half of their screen is their ceiling or their ceiling fan. So a good rule of thumb would be, first, make sure that you keep that iPad, computer, phone, whatever you're using at eye level. And the second is sometimes taking that device and putting it just on a stack of books. So it's eye level or even just looking slightly down at you, right, will fill you up just like you would if you're on TV. You see the frame and there's not a whole lot of room above somebody's head. So those are two really good visuals for when you're presenting or even just being part of a meeting virtually.
Yeah, wow. Now, let's also talk about the substance of what we say and how we say it in a virtual meeting versus in person. As a presentation skills expert, someone that's done all kinds of presentations, one-on-one, high stakes, to audiences, CEOs who are in front of many thousands of people, how has the substance of what we deliver, how does that need to adapt over a virtual or video conference environment?
Well, I think there's some commonalities with what you should do normally, but a really good example, politics aside, would be somebody like Governor Andrew Cuomo. Whether you like him or not, forget about that. He's really a great example of how you blend honesty and bad news, it is what it is, with empathy and authenticity. That's kind of like a staple of crisis management, if you will. But you really have to combine that empathy with what you need to say, because we're all going through tough times. And if you're not somewhat empathetic and you can't show people that you can relate to them because you're in the same boat, then you're going to have a problem connecting. So that's really, really tone and demeanor. The other part of this, when we talk about substance, is really think about your message. And this applies across the board, but even more so now. I'll give you a quick example. Last week before, I'm doing message development and speaker coaching and training with a pharmaceutical company. And the company has their heart in the right place and they're doing great work. That's not the issue. But every time they started to talk, it would be like, here at so-and-so company, we're doing this and we hope to roll out X. And I said, flip it around. Now more than ever, you've got to start with the people that you're doing it for. So hypothetically, if you're working on rolling out a vaccine for, 350 million people or whatever the number is, let's start with the people and the patients who need it, and then talk about what you as a company are doing. And even though, here's the kind of caveat to this, even though that's critical across the board, whether you're talking virtually or not, people have a shorter attention span virtually and they can't see you. So they're texting or they're going, hold on, I'll be right with you. Hold on a minute. And there's all this stuff going on. So you are competing for their attention in a greater way than ever before. So bottom line, if you don't make it about me really quickly, I tune out.
Yeah, really important. In a marketing mode, I call that bad way that you just described, we marketing. It's like,
Yeah.
we, me, I, and people tune out immediately.
Yep.
They tune out with marketing and they tune out with any kind of communication because it's not about them.
Well, you know something, it's interesting, David, because I think with what you do and what I do, it's really the same. I mean, if you think about it, let's say you're sending out, and this is your business, I imagine you agree. Let's say you're sending out an email. Let's say it's a marketing email. If the first 2 paragraphs are all about you, forget it. But if you're telling me what's in it for me, I'll give you one. I attended a webinar the other day. No question, the person leading it has excellent credentials, smart, speaks well, all that stuff. But I timed it. The first 9 minutes of this individual's webinar was focused on sign up for this. Here's the books I read. One click here. I'll give you 30 free minutes. And I was out. But if he had started out differently and given me something of great value, I might have wanted that 30 minutes. Same thing, I think.
Absolutely. Could not agree more. Let's pivot into your fantastic columns for the Business Journal. So you are a Business Journal columnist. Tell us how that came to be. And I also want to ask you specifically, because you've got a couple of really cool columns about 7 steps to ace your next virtual video meeting. Virtual meetings should not replace personal interactions. Lots of good juice in both of those articles. Tell me a little bit how the Business Journal opportunity came to you and how you are monetizing that, spreading the word of Karen Friedman awesomeness.
Thank you for that plug. So the Business Journal column did not come to me. I went to it. So about 10 years ago, I wrote a book called Shut Up and Say Something. Big book, the coaching, all kinds of greats. It's still applicable, all kinds of stuff in it. And quite frankly, I was looking for a way to get publicity and promote my book. So I pitched, at the time, the Philadelphia Business Journal. And I said, what if I wrote columns that are related to this that could help your readers because it's a business book? So originally, it started out as taking different chapters from the book and turning them into articles. And then it took on a life of its own. And I found out that there was something I loved to do that I hadn't been doing before. And it was with the journal. I started just, I always, I'll take a walk outside and I'll observe somebody, or I'll go into the Wawa and I'll see somebody do something. And it can be a great something, or it can be, I can't believe you just did that. That was just terrible. And I started thinking about how do these everyday things that we do relate to leadership lessons, business lessons, and things that, people like you, people like me can apply. And as I started writing, what happened was I got really into writing the columns. I really liked it. And I guess the journal liked it. So it's been many years now. And for me, well, you would get this. It's more of a marketing thing. I'm doing something that I really enjoy doing. Sometimes I can write 4 columns at once and then something won't come to me. In this environment, I've been writing columns that relate to this environment. But at the end of the day, I don't think about, and I really mean this, I've never really thought about monetizing with the journal. It's more of, I get my creative juices out there, and quite honestly, I probably couldn't buy that type of advertising.
Right. Well, you could, but it'd be like 10 grand a month. So,
Yeah, I couldn't afford it.
Hey, could I get a full page ad every single month in all the business journals? Like, yes, you can, but it's pretty expensive.
Yeah. And the cool thing about this is I write for Philadelphia, but there are a handful of columnists that are quote unquote syndicated nationwide.
Yes.
So what that means is for these columnists, and fortunately I'm one of them, if somebody in Pittsburgh or somebody in San Diego likes my column, they can run it. So that's what they mean for me anyway when they say syndicated.
Right. Very, very fun. Well, let me just dig in because you mentioned a couple of really great things in the 7 Steps article, 7 Steps to Ace Your Next Virtual Video Meeting. And I will tell you, one of them is a personal pet peeve of mine. This is about vocal energy. So my wife, for years, because I'm always working from home, I'm doing a ton of webinars, a ton of videos. She says, well, David's business is professional yelling. Professional yelling is what she calls it, not professional speaking or coaching, etc. When people just use their regular day-to-day voice and they're on a video meeting, sometimes that comes across as low energy or low enthusiasm. So just like when you're coaching a CEO, hey, you're going to be in front of 3,000 people. You need to be you plus 20%. Yeah. Right? 20% bigger, 20% louder, 20% more animated, because we don't have a lot of the other cues like body language or gesturing. Tell us about how that speak up. If someone's like, oh, well, Karen, I'm naturally a quiet person. What does that person need to do to amplify it up to be effective on video?
So first of all, they need to understand that there's a difference between a microphone and projecting. So a microphone amplifies you so the people in the convention hall in the back of the room can hear you. But that doesn't substitute for energy. And so while your wife, if she calls you a professional yeller, David, I would take that as a compliment. Because in my house, everybody says you have such a loud voice, probably because I think I'm always on, right? But, I learned a lesson back in my TV days. And here's a way to think about it. So I would stand there, right? And I'd be live or doing a stand-up, as they called it. And there would be one camera. And think about it, back in that day, before social media, 1.5 million people watching. So I would pretend that David, who was cooking dinner in his kitchen and the pots are clanging, couldn't hear me. So I would bring it an octave up to go through the camera into David's kitchen so he could hear me. So if I were, for example, and you just did it, if I'm sitting in a conference room and I'm talking to you and go, David, we really need to rethink this. And I'm one-on-one in front of you in a conference room. Sounds okay, but look at how I just started to get a little drony and boring. So I tell people, you said 20%, take it up a notch. And when I coach speakers, because we run into this all the time, I'll say, all right, do it your way. And I'll tape them. You can do it on your phone. Do it your way. Now I want you to do it my way. I know you're going to feel like you're screaming. Don't worry about it. It's playtime. And then I'll play it back, whether it's audio or video. I want to tell you 100% of the time, they see the difference. So to me, anytime that you are on meeting, conference, presentation, you have to think of it as public speaking because it is.
Yeah, very, very true. Hey, good looking. Are you currently getting paid to speak? Would you like to ramp that up? We can help. Book a confidential speaker strategy call with our team at doitmarketing.com/call, and let's see what we might do together. The call is free, but the results may be priceless. Now, here's the other challenge. I know you write about this and you teach this and preach this. The problem with video conferencing, the way that we do it now on Zoom, on computers, on laptops, on tablets, we are interfacing with the same exact device that contains email, Facebook, all kinds of notifications. Maybe you're a person who gets your text messages as notifications on your laptop. And you figure, well, Karen, it's not my turn to talk, so I'm going to ask you a question. And then I'm just going to check my, I'm waiting for this big important client email. I'm waiting for my wife to text me, honey, do we need bacon from the store?
You're right.
I'll just check out, but then I'll check right back in. What is wrong with that thinking, and how does it screw up people?
There's so much wrong with it on so many levels. It doesn't mean we're all going to change our habits. But first of all, what that means is you're not fully present. That's number one. So you've always heard on all of these conference calls, videos or not, somebody will ask a question. Hey, David, what do you think of that? Oh, I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question? That's because you weren't listening. So if you're texting or emailing, and we've all done it, I'm guilty too, you're not fully there. Second, if you are on, let's say, a Zoom or, where everybody can see you. And this is interesting because I had this happen the other day. Somebody was like this. And somebody said to that person,
down on the phone.
Yeah, what are you doing? Are you with us? You forget that people can see you. I'm going to tell you what I do, and I'm doing it right now. I do not do video calls on my computer. Now, listen, this is interesting. There are exceptions. The other day, I was part of a webinar, and I needed to be on my computer because I needed to be able to see questions that were coming in, answer the questions. It was an association thing. And the association people that were running it, I needed to be able to see them. Okay, that was different. But on these video meetings that my business has turned to, all online at the moment, in my case, I use my iPad. And what I have found out is if I'm away from my computer, the only thing on my iPad is you or the 5 people in my meeting. My email is not coming up. My texts are not coming up. I have my phone nearby for personal reasons. I don't check it for email. I only check it if it rings. I have a mom in a nursing home during all of this, so that's more important than anything else to me. So if I feel it vibrate, I can look. And I can just make sure that it's not something I need to say, excuse me, I have to deal with something. But other than that, my focus is on you.
Really, really good. Let me ask you something from your TV days. And I know that a lot of people screw this up as well. And I'm sure you've gotten this question because I get this question. They say, David, you're so great on these webinars. You're so great on these Zoom calls. What teleprompter are you using? And they are shocked to learn I never use a teleprompter. I wouldn't ever think of using a teleprompter.
Me neither.
Right. So talk about fully scripted teleprompter type presentations versus speaking from an outline or bullets or kind of just short little notes.
Yeah, so they're very different. So I don't use a teleprompter either. But let's say I'm in a meeting and I am making a presentation. And this is really basic, like presentation training 101. I tell people, know the open, because if you know you're open, I'm going to say, today I'm going to talk to you about how to become a great communicator so your reputation and credibility skyrockets. Let's say that's what I'm going to say. Then I come out of the gate at a gallop, if you will, instead of a trot. The next is my 1, 2, 3, my 3 core points, my 3 messages. I know I'm going to talk about red, yellow, and blue. When I talk about red, I'm going to use these numbers. When I talk about yellow, I'm going to use this example. When I talk about blue, I'm going to use this chart. And then know the close, like the open. So if I know that, I'm good to go. If I'm worried that I'm going to miss a couple of really key important facts, like if I'm a researcher or a healthcare company, I tell people, you can take a little sticky and you can stick it on the side of your device with that big number. Because look, I'm looking straight at you, but I can see the number. So having notes is not a bad thing, but it's like with slides. If you can't deliver that talk or presentation without your slides, then that means you don't fully own it. So with slides, I always tell my clients, practice with them so you internalize and you get the rhythm, you know what's going on, and then practice without it so you can converse and not present. That's part 1. Okay, just using your voice, etc. Teleprompter, little different. Back in the days of TV, if you're sitting in a studio and you are the anchor, which is a facilitator, you are the anchor of a newscast, the teleprompter is in the camera because you're reading a script that leads into a report. That's different. Or if you are an executive or even a politician and you are giving a State of the Union address, that's more like a keynote, and not everybody can, and you know this as a professional speaker, not everybody can remember 45 minutes. But the trick, even if you're using that teleprompter, you have to use it in a way, think about the words, tele, visual, prompter, prompt. You have to think about it in a way where it's prompting you and you're not reading. And that takes a lot of skill and a lot of practice.
It does. Probably those of us that are good at it, and we're kidding ourselves by saying, oh, I'm just naturally good at it. No one's naturally good at anything, right? Everything is learned, repeated, practiced, coached. So this is something where those of us that are good at it probably don't give enough credit to how hard we had to work to become good at it and all the milestones along the way, correct?
Yeah, correct. And here's the other thing too, think about your background and think about my background. Okay. So my initial background is in television, and I'm like you, I'm a professional speaker. So, we've worked very hard to hone our craft and practice and practice and practice. And we have lots of experience in front of live audiences and audiences of many sizes. So from that standpoint, it makes us, not that we're so fabulous and wonderful, but it makes us better at it because it's what we do for a living. But if you take, for example, an engineer, they don't have that same skill set, but by the same token, I can't do what they do. So, I used to say to people, listen, if you're going to do a media interview, for example, and let's say it's something pretty heavy duty, you think, well, I know my stuff, I can just do this. Well, no, you can't. So would you get into the ring with a professional boxer just because you have a little playground training? Maybe that's not a good analogy, but to me it is. It's the same thing. Would you get up on stage in front of 2,500 people at an industry event, just say, I can do this? Because you're going to ramble.
Right. Absolutely. Well, speaking of rambling, let's talk about PowerPoint for a minute in this new world. I would sometimes do live presentations where I would just say, by way of explanation, by way of expectation setting, I would say, hey, folks, just so you know, I'm not using PowerPoint today. And that would often get a spontaneous round of applause. You're like, oh, yes, finally, thank God, because so many PowerPoints are terrible. Now, we're doing a lot of things virtual, a lot of video, a lot of webinars, a lot of Zoom. PowerPoints are bad enough, generally, in a live presentation. What are some of your recommendations for do's and don'ts, when to use, when not to use, and how to use PowerPoints as a presentation support tool in this new video-driven world?
In a way, it's kind of weird because I actually encourage people to use a little bit of PowerPoint when they're presenting virtually. And in all of the conference rooms that I'm in, half the time I wish they wouldn't use it because of what you're saying. So think about this. And I can tell you this just on a daily basis. If I'm in a room doing presentation or speaker training, many people have these PowerPoints that really are their scripts. And when you get into a world of, finance or pharmaceutical, there's all kinds of regulatory issues and legal issues, and people can't change them even if they want. So you're fighting, oh, am I going to read or am I going to listen to David? And oh my God, I don't even know where this person is. When we end up on a virtual device, now remember, you're already having a problem getting their attention because they're texting and they're looking at their email and all of the things that you saw. So if you put something in front of them and they decide to read it, they pop back in maybe 3 minutes later, right? They pop back in and now they're flipping through these slides, trying to figure out where the heck you are. And the slides have all this gobbledygook on it. So here's what I tell people. Slides can reinforce what you're saying, but you must only use visuals or a couple of keywords. That's it. So the simplicity becomes even more important today. Let's say, for example, I'm talking about virtual meetings, and I would like to have a slide. My slide might be a picture of somebody with their PC, right? Just the visual. There's free image sites that you can access without copyright problems. And maybe you want to make 2 points. And maybe the points are, look at the camera, project your voice, something like that. All you have to do is just have 2 little bullets. Look at camera. That's 3 words. Project voice. That's 2. I always said your slides pass the glance test. It's like a billboard. If you're driving down I-95 and you look at the billboard, you can see that the guy's advertising suntan lotion. If it had, goodness knows how many words on it, you'd probably hit the person in front of you. Anyway, the short answer is less is more, visuals, few words to reinforce what you're saying. More important, virtually, sometimes than even in a room.
What a great episode. Wowza. Tell you what, if you want to ramp up your revenue as an expert who speaks professionally, you should really check out our free online training at doitmarketing.com/webinar. Well, let's talk about pivoting, because this whole crazy business, we're going to kind of go behind the curtains here and figure out kind of where Karen's business has been and where it's going and how you did this pivot. Our business has pivoted, obviously, heavily, and we continue to invent and reinvent and reconfigure what we're doing and how we're doing it. Tell us about your pivot and where sort of the business was heading in early 2020, and then now how you're really serving your audience on a much deeper, much more urgent level.
Yeah. So first of all, I'm still working on it. And I'll tell you something. When this first started, I had a very, very busy calendar. I had been in Miami and Puerto Rico and Chicago and assorted places, running around, training, speaking. And I came back in early March from Chicago, and I was supposed to go to Denver the following week, and then had a whole bunch of other things going on. And my entire calendar emptied out. I mean, every single thing that was booked for the rest of March and April canceled. And then as this continued and the stay-at-home orders kept getting postponed, everything else evened out. And I was looking at a blank calendar, and I don't know if my word was panic, but I was terribly concerned. People kept saying, Karen, you need to do video coaching. Karen, you need to do webinars. And I kept saying, no, I like to be in front of people. I get my energy from people. I don't want to do all that stuff. And then what happened, at least in my case, it sort of came to me. So I did a couple of things. Number one, I just started focusing on things that I really hadn't had time to do before. Writing more articles, reaching out to people, updating my website, shooting a couple videos, things like that. But then what would happen is people that typically expected to work with me, whether it was, Denver or Cincinnati or where it was, would call and say, so-and-so could use some help. Rather than come out here and do a training, can we get 2 hours with him? Can you do, this? Can you do a webinar? So my calendar has filled up in different ways. And make no mistake about it, I still have to look for ways to keep my business going because like you or like so many, trainers and speakers, I travel all the time. And I don't know when that's going to happen again.
Right.
So what I have found, and I found this over the 23 years of being in business, shifting and changing and adapting and adjusting to things that happen that you're not really happy with, there tends to be a silver lining in this, even though you don't necessarily know what it is. And so for me, it's virtual video coaching. I have a call later this week about doing some presentation training online. And I'm thinking, how do I do it the same way? Well, you know what? There's free webinars. Zoom has stuff. There's platforms. Figure it out. It's figuring it out along the way.
It's funny. I think the thing that you and I and many other successful speaker, consultant, trainer type folks are coming up against, we have a choice. We could hide under our desk and say, woe is me, the world has changed. Or we can look at it, scratch our heads and say, what can I offer now where my clients need it, want it, value it? Because obviously the world has changed in permanent, profound ways. It's going to come back. It's going to come back different. It's not going to come back the same. Right. And I think, like you said, there's a silver lining where if we install a permanent online capability into our business, when events come back, which I think they will, they're going to come back, but now we'll be able to supplement and complement the live event with all sorts of cool value-added things before we meet live, during that event, and after that event. So if you're a $10,000 keynote or $10,000 a day trainer, now you could be a $25,000 per engagement person because you've added so much virtual and online value before we get together face-to-face. During it, it's going to be a richer, deeper, more layered experience. And then afterwards, for ongoing repetition, reinforcement, application, It's not going to be, oh, Karen came and did an event. It's now Karen came and permanently, profoundly changed the way that we lead, the way that we communicate, the way that we pitch, the way that we sell, the way that we're successful in front of our clients, because it wasn't a one-off. It was an entire series of interventions that they always, if you think about it, but now that we have this new component, everyone has this capability of adding and supplementing to your main in-person work.
You know what else? And I thought of something, you're 1,000,000% right. And I thought of something while you're talking. I think it's also important for people, not just you and me, to tap into others. So in other words, when I was doing this webinar last week, the association I was doing it with, it was really very, very well done. So when we were done, I talked to her and I said, what software are you using? How are you doing this? And I started thinking, well, you know what? Maybe I don't want to spend all of my time putting this together, but I could get a webinar producer or my assistant who's really qualified could do it. While you're talking, you're a marketing expert. Perhaps the time comes, I wrote down a couple words you said. You said supplement, complement, series, added. You're somebody, that for me or somebody else could say, you know what, David, I want to tap into you for 30 minutes. I want to pay you a consult fee, whatever it is. And all of a sudden, I'm going to get that added value. Or you and I both belong to the National Speakers Association. I saw something come out the other day. It's somewhere on my calendar. It's a town hall. And normally, quite honestly, I would stay away from those, not because I'm above them, because I was too busy and I was traveling and I don't have time for that. And I saw it come across and I thought, now is the best time ever to attend one of these meetings to see what everybody in your world is doing, because it's almost like a mastermind group. And that sharing is what's going to say to you, wait a minute, what an excellent idea. Maybe I could apply that and my clients would benefit from it, as would I. So I think all of that in today's world, I look at it almost like when I first started my business 23 years ago. I networked with everybody and their brother. I attended so many conferences and so many, I don't do as much of that today because fortunately it's 23 years later, but it's almost like you have to kind of refuel and do that again.
And the personal connections and the personal conversations with friends, colleagues, clients, past clients, mastermind buddies, professional colleagues that you've worked with, even reaching out with caring and empathy and saying, hey, Karen, how are you doing in all this craziness? How has your business changed? Here's what I'm doing. Here's what you're doing. And that idea exchange, not only is it energizing and fun, and it's a source of connection interpersonally, that's where your next big ideas might come from.
It's interesting. In the very beginning of this, I was getting an email once a week with all the stuff in it from somebody that I know really well. And I picked up the phone and called this person, and we had a little chat. And she said to me, well, here's what we're doing, and here's how we're charging. And I shared something with her that I was doing. And she said, oh, no. And I said, what do you mean? She went, if I were you, here's how we do things. Here's a suggestion. And if they don't like it, they'll just say no. They like you. They're not going to say goodbye. I thought about it, spent a lot of hours reconfiguring something. I sent it to them. And while we're still working on it, her advice was so good, because once the ink is signed, it's going to be more lucrative than the way I was doing things.
Right.
And if we hadn't had the pandemic and I hadn't gotten the emails, I would just be doing things the same old way.
Right. That's the silver lining.
That is the silver lining.
So we've got two final questions here in our home stretch. The final question is, how do people get connected and stay connected to more Karen Friedman brilliance? But before we get there, if folks were to take one central idea from communicating effectively in this new version of normal, what would you hope that one big central takeaway might be for folks listening in?
The central takeaway is still the same. And that is, when you communicate, make it about them and not about you. Put people first, put patients first, put customers first, whomever it is that you're talking to. The second thing, virtually as we started, is not the same as in person. So make sure that you become aware of where to look, how to project, what to do with your slides, what kind of background to have, not to sit in front of some big bright window where you're backlit and you look like a silhouette. Take a few minutes and do your homework, and you've got to communicate more frequently. People are, they're scared, they're nervous, they're busy, they're this, they're in meetings, they're texting. You've got to communicate more often, and you have to communicate in a way that is empathetic, with understanding, and be a human being first, because everybody's gone through their own stuff. In terms of me, I'm really easy to find. The website's KarenFriedman.com, Friedman. On that website, there are links to many, many articles, including those Philadelphia Business Journal articles, and also to videos. We are about to hit our 100th video, started it years ago, and you can sign up or you can just watch them. And so if you entered, for example, panel presentations, chances are there's going to be an article or a video on that. So that's the easiest way to get a hold of me. You can always email me through the website too.
Awesome. Karen Friedman, such a pleasure. Great to have you on. Thank you for sharing so many great tips.
Thank you, and stay well, stay safe, stay healthy. That goes to everybody. And look for those silver linings, right?
Amen. Well, that wraps up another episode of The Speaking Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on iTunes. Subscribe. Tell a friend. Go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thespeakingshow.com. See you next time.